Welcome to the Fail Forward podcast. I've met many people over the years who have failed and given up. The point of this podcast is to get people to understand that failure is part of the process. Welcome back to the Fail Forward podcast. I've got Chris Schutrups with us today, who is the owner and founder of The Mortgage Hut. He also owns multiple hospitality businesses and is a serial entrepreneur. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. So we were talking just off air a minute ago about the success that you've been creating recently. And from a lot of people who are probably looking in right now, it all probably looks like you're jet setting off to America and other places and you're creating all these different streams of revenue. But tell us, how did it all start? Where did it start from the beginning, right at the start?
Yeah, so I guess I left college at 16. I went and the first company actually, so I left college. The college asked me to leave. They said, look, you're having great fun here, but you're not really doing a lot. So I had a very stern Dutch father.
Yeah.
So I considered my options as I was traveling home from college that day, and I realized that I was going to have to get out and find a job pretty quick. So this is before job portals and Indeed, Reed. And so I went down to Primark and bought like a £30 suit and walked around the recruitment agencies for a couple of days. And I got two final interviews, one of them being with HSBC, who had a large call centre in the city at the time.
Yeah.
And I took the job. They were the first ones to offer me. I really didn't care what I did. I just wanted to be able to go back and say to my dad, look, I got a job. It's fine. I'm not going to be a bum for my whole life. And so I started training with HSBC. I was a bit of a joker there. It was 4 weeks training. And then by chance, I started the job and I was pretty good at it. And I was... within the first month or two, topping the call centre out of about 300 people. Yeah. And it started from there. And that was where I discovered that actually sales was probably something that I enjoyed doing. Part of my success there, which is the foundations of all success, was actually I was 16. I didn't have a girlfriend. I couldn't drink alcohol. And I worked on a compressed shift system. So I worked 3 days every week, 12-hour shifts. Yeah. So what it meant at the time is this pre-2008, they were desperate for people to work, so I used to work an extra 2 days a week, get paid. They would pay you vouchers just to do the overtime, then they would pay you the overtime, and then you got the commission. So it was a bit of an unfair competition because I spent nearly double the amount of time to get to my 300% to target than everyone else. But that's what drove my success. And then I went into working as a stockbroker in the city. I had these results from a global bank. I think at the time I was ranked in the top 250 in the world for HSBC.
Wow.
And so... I walked into a job in the city as a stockbroker. I did that for a couple of years up until just before 2008 crisis. And that job taught me probably one of many important lessons, but the money does not make you happy. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I earned a lot of money there, but I was probably in my whole life so far the most unhappy I'd been.
And why do you think that was?
I think I was lonely. Yeah. I had no, and this sounds very basic now in the world that we live in of awareness, but I had no work-life balance. Yeah. My boss is still my friend today and is an incredible leader, but, he used to make sure I was at the desk at 7 a.m. in the morning to get his breakfast. Yeah. And when I told this story at my wedding a couple of years ago, he said, but I did pay for your breakfast in return. And some nights I'd be there till, you used to have to make 400 or 500 calls a day. You didn't have a chair. You stood up. There's no dialers. There's no spreadsheet, no interconnected telephone systems. This was dialing 400 or 500 numbers a day, bent over. I'm 6'7", as you know. Yeah. And I would be there still sometimes at 9 o'clock at night. Then I would get the train home to Southampton to get up at 4 a.m. the next day, and then when I came to live in London, because that was a little bit too much, you then end up drinking a lot, partying. The London life, I've experienced that. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And I was living in a small apartment in Blackheath. I was getting up still at 6 o'clock with my face in someone's armpit on the train, and so I came back, and 2008-ish time I came back and I got a job in NatWest running a branch in the middle of the New Forest, which was night and day to what I was used to, because I would turn up at 8:30, open the branch up, sit on the front desk, talk to all the retirees, and then go home, and there wasn't a lot of pressure, and it seemed great for quite a while. And then I thought, you know what, and bear in mind, I'm still only 18 at this point.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking, I don't know if this is really going to satisfy me for the rest of my life.
So you got bored.
Yeah, and boredom was coming, you know, pretty quick. And so I went into mortgages.
Yeah.
I got a job. I didn't really know loads about mortgages. I rented a house, and I got a job for a corporate estate agency who trained me, paid for all my qualifications, and you know, again, I went into that, and the same sort of work ethos of working hard, trying to do a good job, putting in the hours meant that very quickly I was number one in the region. And I worked with a really inspirational estate agent who said to me, he was also very talented, and he said, I'm going to start my own estate agency. You should do my mortgages.
Perfect.
And I thought, bloody hell, I'm going to be driving a Bentley, gold-plated teeth, you know, so, and I went to my parents, who were not wealthy.
Yeah.
You know, my dad was a guard on the trains. My mum was a housewife looking after my grandmother, and they lent me £10,000, which was an awful lot of money to them. And off I went, starting to plan this new mortgage business. Yeah. And by the time I'd opened the doors, the 10 grand had turned into 4 grand, because at the time you needed consumer credit licenses and you need loads of things. And so I started the business, and in the first week, the gentleman that I was doing it with, who was the estate agent, took an employed role.
Wow. And so he bailed in the first week.
I was thinking, oh shit, basically. And I had a pregnant girlfriend, and I had a rented house, and suddenly I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a problem, you know. And I had never booked, I talk about acquiring customers, I'd never even booked my own customers into my diary. Someone had done that for me. So suddenly I was thinking, how do you do this? What do you do? So I did research. I tried to read on Facebook, was still very new. You know, you don't have the same element of content via YouTube and stuff that you do now. And so I went onto forums, because forums were the main thing.
Yes,
I know. I remember. Now it sounds very old school saying forums, but I went onto forums and I read financial advice forums. And so I signed up to things like B&I.
Yeah.
And I was in my suit, probably still the same £30 suit. Yeah. No, I think I had more expensive ones after being the stockbroker. Yeah. Walking down the high street with my briefcase, just asking estate agents if I could do their mortgages. Yeah. And, you know, it was a challenge. It was really difficult. I'd gone from earning a lot of money to earning £200-300 a month. Yeah. You know, we would get our commission payments on a Wednesday from our network. You know, on a Monday I was having to go and get bread and milk from my parents' house because I didn't have any money. Like, it wasn't in my bank account. I had nothing, you know, and if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to eat. And I didn't have, people forget in the world of available credit that we have now. Yes. My highest credit limit at that point was a £250 credit card. Yeah. And it was maxed out. Yeah. You know, so
constantly.
I was so screwed. And so that was, you know, that's the journey up until starting the mortgage business. Yeah. And, you know, highs and lows. And, the mortgage business really was that first. I had a long period of time where most of the stuff I had touched had gone very well, and it was the first time where I was sort of looking into the abyss.
And how did that feel?
Scary. You know, it's scary. Business is scary, and this is why, you know, even people listening and watching this, there will be people who are sat there with a great business idea or thinking they can do business differently, but they haven't done it yet. Yeah, and that's because of our egos. Because of our pride, because our fear of failure, you know, all of the things that are outside our comfort zone. And, you know, the reason why I didn't give in at that stage at the mortgage business was because I was stubborn. Yeah. You know, because I was determined and I didn't want to fail and I didn't want people to see me fail. And at that point, I genuinely, it was probably more likely that I was going to fail than succeed is the reality. If you look at it on a balance of probability, there was more chance that I would have failed there, you know, but one big motivator is I'd taken £10,000 from my parents, which was a lot of money to them, you know, and I wasn't just about to piss it down the drain. And so, you know, I'd gone for a couple, at that sort of 6-month window, I went for a couple of interviews, considering my option with jobs. You know, one of those businesses who offered me the job, we actually ended up buying later on in the journey. Wow. Which was, you know, which was great. Yeah, what
a moment.
Yeah, indeed. But, you know, it was years and years of not earning a lot, working very hard, but being I determined / stubborn.
Yes, and where do you get that from?
So my father, who I touched on, was a very, very stubborn and determined Dutchman, I guess. You know, very direct. There's a thing called Dutch directness, and I think I take a proportion of my mother's kindness and my father's directness, and sort of fall somewhere in the middle. I always try and think of myself as a pretty straight shooter. So he was definitely. Could be intimidating, I guess, in a nice way. The kindest man in the world, very soft heart. But he lacked some interpersonal skills, I would say, in a kind way. And my mother, was stubborn in a different way, I guess. Probably stubborn in the way that she put up with my dad. But she, so I get those from my parents, and I do think. Stubbornness might not be the right quality, but I think being determined in a business journey is almost an absolute prerequisite that you need to have, I think. Yeah, and so you touch on your parents there, and you've borrowed the money. How did it feel, and how were they through the time with the support? And just to a secondary question to that is you mentioned you was a train driver. Where did you get your entrepreneurial bit from? So I think that's a really good question, actually, and I don't think I've ever really talked about this, but my father actually was an entrepreneur. So he came from Holland, so he had two options as a career as well. One was to go to hotel school, and one was to do economics at university. And he chose hotel school because it was further away from his parents' house. And so that was in Amsterdam, and he studied at university and at a hotel school, which was called the Apollo. And the program was that you did a role in each part of the hotel for 3 months as a manager, and you came out as a fully fledged general manager of hotels. Nice. So he left Holland to go and work in Manchester, and then he came to Southampton, where he met my mother, and they bought a business in Scotland, which is where I was born. Although you can't tell from the accent. They bought a business in Scotland, which was a hotel, and the hotel relied on a local factory that was there. And the factory did very well. The hotel did very well. My parents then went on to buy subsequent businesses, bars, nightclubs. Unfortunately, the factory closed. And a large proportion of the town in rural Scotland worked for the factory. So it was all an economy around the factory. So no one came to the hotel to stay anymore because the executives weren't visiting. No one went out to the bars because the employees didn't have jobs. And so subsequently, my mum and dad went bankrupt. And that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And so, my dad went on a journey of, a fairly challenging journey to find a new job. He used to do things like buying loaves of bread and selling sandwiches out the car boot of his car, and worked on an ice cream van and loads of different stuff. And we relocated to Southampton when I was 4, where my grandmother, my mother's mother, lived. And my dad still went around to try and find jobs, and he ended up, and this is an important lesson in itself, he went from being the assistant general manager of a hotel to when he came back, he was the guy that washed the plates and the dishes at night, because that was the only job that was available. And that taught me a really good lesson, that you have to be willing, as I say, as a man, but really as anyone, but as a leader of a family, you have to be willing to do any job and put your pride to one side. That is really, really important, and there's no shame in that at all. And that taught me a good lesson. But one of my dad's, and my dad passed away last year, but one of the things that he said to me, no problem, was that he said his lack of ability in business at the time, and it was very different to how it is now because we have a lot of information at our fingertips, was he was not good at marketing. And that was his challenge. And he said to me, if he was, maybe it would have been different. But the thing about his failure there in the late 80s and the early 90s was he never got back on the horse. And I've always told myself, and I have had an element of failures in businesses, because as you do, by definition, there are going to be failures in your business, in businesses that you have. That's just life. But what I've always told myself is that I will always get back on that horse. And that's, that takes a lot of courage, actually, when you have failed, when you're on the ground, when you've been beaten down, and generally when you have failure, and I've had elements of failure and things, people will you quickly work out who are the genuine people in life, and who are the people that follow you when you're in success but bugger off when you're not having the best time. Does that make sense? 100%. I experienced all of that through my failure. And so I guess my business journey started a lot earlier than most, because I saw the hardship. We used to have 8 of us in our family: my brother, my sister, my brother's wife and his children. We had 4 pets, and we lived on £3 a day.
Wow.
You know, to say we were poor, we were really poor.
Yeah.
You know, my dad worked a night job. My mum worked a day job, and we didn't have enough money for 2 bus passes. They used to get me up in the morning, walk me to the bus stop, swap the bus pass, and then walk back.
Wow.
You know, and you know, and we didn't, you know, although they did an incredible job as parents, we didn't have spare money to do lots of holidays. You know, I remember probably when I was between 8 and 10, my parents were exceptionally proud that they managed to pay for a holiday for us to go to Holland, which they paid up front. They didn't believe in credit, you know.
Yeah.
A little bit about loyalty. You know, my dad stuck with Alliance and Leicester and Santander until the day that he died. And the reason for that was they were the only person who would give him a bank account after the bankruptcy.
Wow.
Everyone else told him no.
Yeah.
So, you know, that also comes through. You know, I'm very aware in business and in personal life, loyalty is everything.
Yes.
But you've also got to give that as well as receive that.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So through that time when they lent you the money, how was that when you were coming back to get food, and how did that work out?
Well, you know, I didn't feel any real shame getting the food. You know, my parents at the time, when they could see it was the toughest, tried to reassure me that it didn't matter if I lost the money.
Yeah.
But, you know, the fact that I was aware that they had worked so hard for that money, you know, my dad, I think when he passed away, I looked through his stuff, and his salary working at Southampton Airport Parkway Station when he started was about £10,000.
Wow.
You know, so a year before tax.
Yeah.
You know, so he had to work quite a long time for that 10,000 he gave me, on top of feeding a family and doing everything. So, you know, it was definitely one of the main motivators in the back of my head. You know, I guess I thought to myself, and there is a lesson as well in business that you need to know when you're beaten.
Yes.
You know, at that point, maybe I wasn't fully aware of that concept either. But, you know, that motivator in the back of my head taught me I'm going to really make sure that I've given this everything, you know. And so I had that money element. I had, you know, a newborn son. You know, so there were quite a lot of there was a lot of pressure, for sure, an awful lot of pressure. But there was also a lot of motivating factors that meant that, and pride, you know, ultimately was a big part of it for me.
I mean, I'm sure your dad was, but very proud of what you've achieved now, and to see that through, and to keep going, all that determination.
Yeah, and you know, we'll come on to the hospitality businesses a little later, but they were a big part of his final years. You know, one of my main motivators in life was to make my dad proud. Yes. You know, and so you know, you go on a journey. The last year's been an interesting one for me. When you lose that anchor of why you do stuff, it's been a bit of a journey of thinking, okay, well, why do I do stuff? Yeah. You know, because for many years, that's been my motivator. And you know, even at the point that we started this conversation about when I left college, I wasn't particularly proud of myself for the position that I got myself in. You know, I hadn't really thought about the consequences of what I was going to have to face at that time. Yes. But yeah, you know, I think he was proud, and I think you know, even though he's not here today, I still strive. You know, and I have a son who's 11 now. You know, and 11, 12 now, and you know, I try and be a good man for him, and make the right decisions so that he has a good role model. You know, and that's with children. You know, we're a blended family. I've gone from a journey where, you know, I grew up with not a lot to we now have children where we are comfortable for sure. Yeah. And you try and teach them similar lessons in a different environment, I would say. You know, try and get them doing jobs and understanding the value of money and things as well.
Which is a challenge, because I see that with Esme and Ned as well. And it's a challenge because now they have the access to funds, and you've got to try and change those into...
I have to tell my daughter she's not having steak at lunchtime at every restaurant we go. You know, and I sort of think to myself, it's crazy. We'll go into a restaurant and there'll be a £40 steak and she'll want that for lunch instead of a sandwich. And so, but our children, we're very lucky, you know, they all do jobs in one way or another and value. I was teaching, me and my sons went on a little trip to Istanbul this weekend, and I was trying to teach them about compound interest and showing them it online, and they found it fascinating. And I actually thought, you know, it's something that, you know, we don't teach ourselves or our children a lot of these things. So, you know, it was quite fun in trying to show them. I took a compound interest calculator and showed them if they had £100 to start with and they saved £40 a month, by the time they were 65, what it'd be, and it sort of blew their minds, really.
Really valuable lesson.
Eighth wonder of the world. I know, you can imagine how much fun they were having on the plane with me me telling them all this. They were with no phones.
Yeah, amazing. Love that. Okay, so let's just go back again to you've managed to get through the first few years of business.
Yeah.
And how did you grow from that one person that knew nothing about marketing and those kind of stuff? How did you get to where you are now? How was that, and what challenges did you face?
Yeah, well, lots of challenges. I think I could be a whole series for you
if
you were doing challenges. But I guess the first thing I did in the early days was I tried to get around and speak to as many of my larger competitors as possible.
Yeah.
And I just listened.
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you do it? And just understanding how it worked for them. Because our business started in that I needed one or two opportunities.
Yeah.
So the B&Is and stuff worked really well. The florist might give me their sister as a mortgage opportunity, and the accountant might give me one of their clients, and that's perfect. Starts to feed that top end of the funnel. Enough to get from that absolute poverty that I was really in to a point of being able to at least pay my bills.
Yes.
Because in financial advice, you also have to be fit and proper. So, the last thing I want to do is miss my bills and then not be able to do my job.
Sure.
So just listening to other entrepreneurs, other business owners, talking about their proposition, what they do, how they do it, and learning from them, and trying to take, just in an hour-long conversation, just take one nugget of information. A little bit why we listen to information like this podcast. Is people take different things from different stuff, but it's all about trying to better yourself and understanding more. And so the business went, and the way that our business works is that we get a lot of referrals and recommendations. So what I understood very quickly, and what is a really important message for all of my team members that I put out every single day, is putting the customer at the heart of what we do.
Yeah.
And I realised if I had really happy customers, they could at least continue to feed me little introductions, and that's how we grew. And it got to a point where I was at full capacity.
Yeah.
And I interviewed a chap called Bob White as my first mortgage advisor, and he still works for me today. The interview was essentially him interviewing me.
Wow.
By the end of it, I thought, what has happened here? I have no idea what's just happened. Yeah. But he joined, and he was already in his mid stage of life. I would say he's now, I don't think he minds saying, in his 60s.
Yeah.
But he then started doing mortgages, and I grew the business from there. And the business today is about 21 regulated mortgage advisors. It's run by my wife Nicola. And we probably have another 15 or 20 amazing support staff that work with us. At the peak it was larger, and that was about 2016, and there's been a journey where we went from being one person to growing to a team of self-employed advisors who were all brilliant, but sort of a bit like herding cats sometimes, because as you can imagine with contractors and consultants, they say, well, I'll do what I want, or I'll do this, and IR35 rule means that pretty much they can do what they want. And so by about 2015-16, I'd really started to nail the marketing. Yeah. And I'll give you my first big victory, I'd say. Yeah. I had been a special constable for Hampshire Police. Yeah. Okay. For five years. Yeah. And the great thing was, every time I went into the police station, someone would go, "Oh my goodness, you're the guy that does the mortgages, right?" Yeah. And I go, "Yes, I am." And they go, "I need my mortgage doing." And actually, if you want to know the number one way that my business survived at the start, was really that. Yeah. Really, that was because every time, what I actually did was I did more shifts volunteering. Yeah. I was volunteering because I didn't have loads of work. Yeah. I was doing like four days a week volunteering. I was nearly a full-time volunteer. Wow. But every time I went in, I'm amongst a team of 30, 40, 50 hard-working and honourable police officers who do an amazing job, and they would go, "Oh, my mortgage is up, you should do my and then another one goes, "Oh yeah, he did my mortgage, he's really good." And so it grew from like my shift to my station to, they used to call them occupational command units, to eventually pretty much the whole force. Yeah. And so from 2011 to 2014, that's the journey I went on. Yeah. And then one day someone said to me, "Why don't you create like a brand for police?" Yeah. And I thought, that sounds like a great idea. I don't know why I haven't thought of it. So I started a brand called Police Mortgages. Yeah. And at the time, no one was talking about Facebook marketing at all. Everyone was talking about Google. And I thought to myself, and this is before police officers were aware of not listing their employers or their job on social media, one, because of, potential people that don't like them, but also their biggest, I guess, the biggest threat now for them is their own police forces who are pursuing them ruthlessly, I would say, in some ways. So I would demographically target. So I'd say...
So you're niching into the police.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'd have my brand and I would say, okay, to the Facebook algorithm, I would say, okay, only show my advert to if they list themselves as working for one of these 48 police forces. Yeah. So it was easy to niche down. It wasn't like it was 1,000 companies, 10,000 companies.
Yeah.
Or if they have one of these job titles.
Yeah.
So suddenly I went from showing my advert to 100 people and it being relevant to 10 to being relevant to 100 people. Yeah. And I mean, in the first week, not knowing anything, I was able to generate 300 inquiries.
Wow.
And I did that by driving them into a mortgage calculator to see how much they could borrow.
Wow.
Now, that was a great success.
Yeah.
And also a start of a lesson of getting people at the right point in the sales funnel.
Yes.
Because we were busy fools at that point. But when you've been starving, as you'll know from starting your own business, being busy with stuff that might not convert is still better than being completely dead.
It's a good problem to have. It's a good problem.
Completely. So, and if you think at the time we worked on a basis that that data capture came via an email, and I just forwarded emails out to my team. We didn't have a CRM, we didn't have a follow-up process, we didn't do anything. But you know what? We did more business than we were before. And the cost to acquire the customer was so low because Facebook had no one on its platform. Yeah. At the point of about 2016, 17, Facebook hit capacity for advertising, and that's when prices started to really shoot up.
Sure.
So that was 2014, and that journey went exceptionally well, and the business grew very, very quickly. Yeah. And by 2016-ish, we had nearly 30 regulated advisors. Wow. We had the same in support staff behind. And that is where I faced another challenge, which was I got to a point where Facebook hit capacity for advertising. Yeah. I had swapped to an employed model. Because I wanted better control. Yeah. I wanted to be able to say, guys, I want you to be on the phone from 9 till 6 with an hour's lunch. I don't need you out networking. I don't need you on the golf course. I don't need you to generate leads.
Yeah, I'll feed you the leads.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been my position of power in the business that's meant that our business has significant values where others don't. Yes. Is that we control all of the lead source. We own all of the customers. Yeah. And we set that out very clearly from the beginning with all our team members. Yeah. So, but the cost to acquire the customer went up. Yeah. The cost from Facebook went up significantly. Yeah. And it went from, initially about being £3 to acquire a customer to being nearly £25 at the time. Wow. Our conversion wasn't great because people trusted Facebook ads less. Yeah. The way that they were pushing to get the conversions meant that the quality of leads had come down as well. Yeah. And suddenly I was at a point where I couldn't make money. Yeah. I couldn't make money but I couldn't afford not to pay for the ads because I had a team of 30 people that needed feeding. Yeah. So
you've grown from 1 up to 30 quite quickly.
Yeah, and you're sort of stuck now because what do? You've got two options. You can make people redundant, and I do. We have hundreds and hundreds of amazing people that work across all the businesses, and sometimes it's hard to convey to all of them. But I do take the responsibility of them being able to pay their mortgage, pay their rent. Yeah, feed their children very seriously. Yeah, and part of that comes from the start of this story that we've started on. Yeah, where I've been there myself. So I take those decisions. I don't take the decision of making positions redundant, closing businesses. That's not one that I take lightly. Yeah. And so I made the decision to try and trade out of it. Yeah. We had at my peak of problems in the mortgage business, our cash flow gap was about 50 grand a month. Yeah. And we had no money. Yeah. And I was sat there days before some paydays thinking, how am I going to sort this out? Yeah. And actually I rolled the dice and I played a bit of a risky game. Yeah. And I borrowed from high rate lenders I won't say their names on, but some high rate lenders who charge, a
lot of money.
Yeah. But on the basis that my cash flow window I can see. Yeah. And one of the frustrating things in my business, in the mortgage business, was that unlike, say, a hospitality business where today if you go and eat a meal in one of our restaurants, I have the money tomorrow. Yeah. In the mortgage business, generally our cash flow window is about 9 months from when we first speak to the customer. So if I speak to you today, it might take 3 months for you to find a property. Yeah. It may then take 4 or 5 months to move in, and we might get paid a month later. Yeah. And so the frustrating thing when I had that cash flow gap was I could see my pipeline was very strong. Yeah, I could see I had a lot of income. Yeah, and I could see it was there. But unfortunately, people don't lend on hopes. Yes. And dreams. Yeah. And I've never, to the best of my knowledge, I've never paid a start member late because my opinion is, and my dad told me a story many years ago when he worked for the train company where they didn't pay his overtime, and so the next day he didn't go to work. Yeah. And I have always had a very strong belief that I can only ask my team to be as loyal as I pay them. Yeah. And again, it's important that they are paid for the work that they do, because ultimately, when there are upsides across all the businesses, they may benefit. But the main benefactor of that is me and my family.
Yeah.
And so with that, I also have to take the downsides. Yeah. And that is business.
You do have to take the downsides, and I completely commend you for everything you're saying, because I have the same ethos. Even when our business was failing, I was making sure I was paying everybody, and that would be sacrificed to me. Yeah. But how were you coping with it all, with a family and all this going on? How did you cope?
I'm very lucky that my wife, so I met my wife in 2015. Yeah. By complete chance. She had been a mortgage advisor before. Yeah. We didn't even know this straight away. Yeah. She actually worked for British Airways as cabin crew. Yeah. And she is far more intelligent than I am, an A-star student, very clever. And so within a year or so of us being together, she had started assisting me in the businesses. Yeah. And so one way of coping is that, my wife has always understood the pressures and challenges. Yeah. And that works quite well, because, my job involves travel, networking, late nights, whether it be, award shows in London, to presenting awards to members of the armed forces or the police officers or other emergency services that we deal with, launches of new home sites, whatever it may be. She understands that I work I would say, if I phrase it another way, we both have aligned interests. We're both working towards the same goals, the same aspirations. Yeah. And so that makes it a little bit easier to be able to communicate when you have good and bad times. Yeah. And also to be able to sound and reason off of, and to make sure, because in business sometimes you do think, am I mental? Yes. You're
sometimes a lot.
Yeah. And you're looking at decisions, and I guess your decision making abilities as time goes on becomes refined and better. Yeah. One lesson that someone taught me once, which I think is very true, is anyone can lead a team in a good time. Yeah. The actual making of a leader is when you make a decision wrong. Yeah. And the way that you turn it around. And so when I've affected change across all the businesses that I worked in, and there's still some to talk about, I guess what I do say to my teams is I am going to make changes, and they will be for the better of everyone. Yeah. But rest assured, if I get it wrong, which I may, because I'm human, I will sort it out. Yeah. And all I ask you to do is follow me blindly. Yeah. And if I get it wrong, I'll put it all right for you. Yeah. This is not gonna be a problem. And so, when especially with sales teams, as humans, we don't like change. Yeah. If I say, we're going to change this, generally my default position is I say, let's try this for 4 weeks. Yeah. And this lesson I learned when I was at NatWest. Yeah. As a 17, 18-year-old branch manager. Yeah. And I had ladies and gents who worked on the counter who had worked there for 30, 40 years. Yeah. And I'd come in and I knew nothing. Yeah. And so how I used to get them to affect change was not by telling them, because they wouldn't listen to me because I was a kid. Yes. Okay. How I did it was I used to say, okay, let me sit at the desk for an hour. And I'd sit there and you come in and I go, oh, Henry, I can see that you're due a review on your savings account. Would you like to speak to someone about that? And you go, oh, yes, please. Actually, I would. And so I would show them for an hour that actually by doing it, it worked. Yeah. And I'd say, well, if it works for me, it'll work for you.
Amazing.
And that's similar to how I try and affect change now. I will take the brunt of the responsibility. All I ask is for my teams, and in a lot of our businesses, not in the hospitality, but in the other businesses, for the teams that I oversee, I recruit myself still. Yeah. I don't use a recruitment agent. I don't have a line manager recruiting them. I will recruit them, because then I can look in the white of their eyes and say, just so you know, I probably, to start with, will expect you to work twice as hard as you ever have done, maybe for less money as well. Yeah. But this is where we're going in the long run. And I'm also able to say to them, salespeople generally building pipelines, it's a bit depressing because they come in, they have no pipeline, they work very hard. It takes a while for them to convert. And so I will generally say to them, my job is to talk you off for the first 3 to 6 months, it's to talk you off the edge of that cliff and tell you that it's going to be okay. Yeah. And then once you're there, it's my job to get the most out of you. Yes. And that really works. That's a lesson that you learn of managing people, is that if you lay it out, if you try and be an effective communicator with them, and take them on the journey. A business coach once told me, they said, your job, Chris, is super simple. You're the chief storyteller. Yes. And that's it. We all come to work for a reason, but they need to know what that reason is.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely love that. Yeah. I went to Bremont watches the other week.
Yeah.
And they've just had £48 million worth of investment in the last year, and they're still not profitable. And the reason why I'm saying this is because the story of Bremont is they've sold that to their investors and everybody, and it just rings so true.
And technology. Most technology companies, it's been toughening in liquidity in the markets, but I work for a large technology business which we'll get onto, and actually it is about the story, it's about the journey. And actually technology businesses have had it really, tech businesses, the fear of investors is that they don't want to miss the next Google, and the story, and I think
it all counts in, doesn't it?
And as businesses grow, when I think about brands and when I look at brands and when I think about businesses, we all love an underdog. And actually when we talk about failing, in the UK, there's an element of a negative connotation that comes with bankruptcy and failing. You go to America, bloody hell, you're not a businessman if you haven't failed, But on the flip side, how many businesses in the UK, have someone who have failed and they come out as the underdog in the David and the Goliath story, and they create this sort of incredible brand that grows up. And so I think if there's anyone listening to this now who's at a point where they're feeling like they're at a point of failure or are at a point of failure, just remember it isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. And there's it's the journey that you're on that counts. And
100%.
so the tougher things in life definitely, one, make us hopefully better business people, but to add a bit of colour to that story that you're telling.
Definitely. And how do you enjoy your journey? Because you've got so many things spinning, and it must be pretty intense. So how do you enjoy your journey?
So I guess I came back from, I worked in the UAE, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point. And I came back in 2021. And at the time, I told myself, I'm only going to do stuff that I enjoy. And I got to a fairly fortunate position where a lot of the businesses that I was involved in were profitable and doing well. I'd financially done well in the Middle East, and so and that's what I try and do now. If I'm honest, I guess I only want to do stuff that I enjoy. I only want to do stuff that's fulfilling. You and I had a conversation before we started, and we talked about Stephen Bartlett. And one of the things, I watched him live in London, I think, like you did, and we talked about the one thing that you take away from something. And this was the one thing that I took away from his talk, which was around his most unhappy time, or one of his most unhappy times, which was when he sold his digital marketing business, and he had all this money in the bank, but where is the purpose? And that's a little bit what I felt like when I came back from Dubai. All of my stuff was functioning pretty well, and I thought to myself, what is my purpose? I don't know, and I've been on a bit of a journey to find out. I've had some fun, I've had some not too much fun in other businesses, but I try and get up every day and just enjoy what I do. I'm really, really lucky, and I mean this genuinely, like I work across businesses with some really great people, and it's just they're all motivated like I am to try and build something great for our customers, and if you do that, you're going to make money. So
love that. And you've talked a lot about values and team and everything like that. So is the culture important to you?
Culture is important, and I guess the answer is yes on culture, and that comes from the top all of the time. You can't believe one thing in your heart and say something else, because people are people are emotionally savvy. They understand how you feel, but having the best people is important. And I learned that fairly early on, that I needed people who are far more competent than I am, far more capable at their jobs, who are just incredible people. And so, I have really talented people around me, and I will come up with ideas, a lot to do with like our processes, our systems, like our systems and controls. I will think in just a logical, normal way, and I'll say, I think we should do that or do this, and then we'll have either our tech people or our operational managers who actually work out how that we effectively do that in a way that's sustainable. And so, I would say you're nothing without your team, really. And also, you touched on I'm able to travel and do stuff. Actually, I can't get up and do what I want to do every day if I have to do all the stuff that I don't want to do. Does that make sense?
100%.
And so the journey is always about, okay, the stuff that I don't want to be involved in, how do I build that process? How do I build that system? How do I make it? Because actually the number one person who causes problems and challenges in the business is me.
Yeah.
Because I'm inconsistent.
Yeah.
I'm doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
So I'm not on my desk. I'm not on my phone.
Yeah.
And so it's about saying, okay, how do I have these businesses working where I'm not in them? I am not needed. I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And my aspiration long term is to be able to do my job anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I spent a month in Thailand at the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
I'll spend another month in August with my wife working, there. And so it's about saying, okay, well, if I want to live in America 6 months of the year, live in Asia somewhere 6 months of the year, how can I make the business so that the advisors across the businesses all work still and we have great customer outcomes? How do I make sure that if you come into one of our restaurants that you still have that amazing customer experience, and that's sort of what I'm always trying to build out and feel. And you can only really do that properly by looking at the problems that you have and the issues you have and where you're not getting it right rather than what you are getting right.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. And I love that because essentially it's an episode I've done before about the business owner being the bottleneck, and what you're saying there is like, I could be the bottleneck in my business, and quite often people get stuck into the operating, and I've got to own an operator rather than stepping back and going, how do I not operate this and work on it? Yeah. Which then leads me into the hospitality side of the things you do. I grew up in a restaurant and hotel. Similar. We've got very similar things. We've got Dutch background, and my dad very hardworking, very stern but soft. And they burnt themselves out by working in their restaurant in the 80s, 90s, and almost lost it. And my question is how did you get into that hospitality side, and how did you not get yourself stuck into suddenly being in an owner-operator? Because I know that Figurati, one of the best restaurants in Southampton, I've met you in it, and I know at the beginning you were in there, but how did you make sure that you weren't in it all the time, and how did all those start?
Well, I think and great question. I think it's really easy to sit in hindsight when it's gone well and claim that everything was really well planned out and you knew what you were doing. I guess I got into hospitality because a family member of mine had worked in a pub for many years as an employee, and I thought to myself, I think that they can do more, earn more, and be happier in a business that they own themselves. So I found a pub to buy. Yeah. And I bought it, and subsequently actually they stayed where they were and bought the business that they were in. Yeah. So suddenly I had this pub, and I didn't really know how to run a pub. I know how to eat food and talk. That's about it. And so I went on a journey with that, and actually by chance I did very well there. Yeah. It went from doing about £6,000 a week in trade to, in the height of the summer, sort of £30,000 a week. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more at times. So real 5x in growth. And I was thinking, bloody hell, I am good at this. Yeah. And so I took a couple more pubs, and it turned out, luck does play part of our successes as well. Yeah. I believe in the harder I work, the luckier I get, but sometimes luck just does hit you in the face as well. Yeah. And so at the same time, I had an opportunity to acquire 3 units in Southampton on a leasehold basis, of which I took 2 of them. I invested into one business, a really great one called The Olive Tree, which I subsequently sold out of, and my friend and partner runs that now, very, very successful still now, and Figurati in Southampton, which has done exceptionally well as well. And if I'm being honest with you, talking about challenges, I got to the point where Figurati was a couple of months from opening, and had a couple of pubs, had a couple of bars. I'd invested in a couple of things. I was it had become a very expensive hobby. Yeah, and I had budgeted about £250,000 for Figurati. Yeah, in my initial very back of the fag packet, and it had gone up to about 500 by the time that we'd started the work. Wow. Yeah. And by the time that we finished, including VAT, it had hit about just shy of £800,000. Wow. And I was thinking, okay, this may be the thing that breaks me here. Mm-hmm. I thought, why the hell? What possessed me in this? And got to the point where actually the week that we opened, I couldn't afford to buy the outside furniture. Yeah. I could have put it on a credit card. But I thought to myself, you know what? Like, I just have to wait here and see and get some trade coming through. And And I have a business partner and his wife in this bit. So it's four of us, my wife and I, and him and his wife. And, I'm very lucky. You'll find on most of my businesses, whether it be my wife or someone else, I have a partner. And that's not because I don't have the confidence to do the businesses, but I'll normally in the Olive Tree, the gentleman that I did that with, had one of the most successful restaurants in the city already. So I was able to learn from him and understand, my business partner in Figurati is very well known in the city. Run the city's nightclubs, and so when I stood there on the first night when we looked at the unit, I said the challenge is going to be filling this, and he said that's the least of our worries. And I thought, well, if he's got that covered, I can probably cover the rest. And so, we actually had, my wife and I had a bit of a moment where we sat back and looked last year, actually, and we said, we're a little bit busy fools here, because we have businesses that were doing all very well, or pretty much all very well. A couple of ones that we've disposed of since that weren't doing as good. But most of them were doing very well. But bloody hell, we were doing the same jobs twice.
Yes.
We were both working across all the businesses. We were both. And so what we did was we said, okay, what is our core business?
Yeah.
And what is then our other businesses that are profitable, that are sustainable long term, and that are probably going to have a sale value when we decide to exit.
Yeah.
And the other big caveat was whether they were profitable or not, did they give us a headache?
Yeah.
And if they, we disposed of two pubs, one lost us a significant amount of money. Yeah. One of them made us money, but, gave us quite a lot of, took away bandwidth, should we say.
Yeah.
And that's allowed us to really focus on our core businesses, scaling up, so you do, and I think in any business that people run, there is a challenge.
Yeah.
And this is my opinion, and I am only a small business owner, so maybe as time goes on, this gets easier. But there is no one that cares as much as you do about your business. Agreed. Okay, and you, as skilled and competent as staff will be, and as committed and as loyal as they will be, you cannot expect them. It is not reasonable to expect them to work as hard as you will.
Yes,
it's not. And a business owner and an entrepreneur will say to you, "Oh, my staff, they just don't care. They don't do it like I do." That's because they don't have the upside. It's not their dream. It's not their baby. They're there. They may believe in your vision. Yeah, in your dream, but there is only so much you can ask of team members. Yeah, and so we touched on the story and the journey and the vision. Figurati is a good example. One of the directors was in at the start every weekend in the evening to greet our customers, to give them that experience, and to show our team members what we expected.
Yes,
and that's why we were there. Yeah, and just to get that vibe going, let them understand what's expected, and show them that we're there. I generally find, I guess, a little bit like if you were a major or a captain or a general in the army, I think you would probably have a more loyal team if you stood at the front and marched in with them than standing at the back watching them. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I feel that. I've had some time away from a business last year, and I've come back in, and it needed. Someone wasn't leading it, and of course there wasn't. We weren't getting the results from when I was leading it, and that's the way it's got to be sometimes. And just to loop back round, which I think is really poignant, is we talked about in the beginning about knowing when to put the white flag up, or knowing really important skill to knowing when to stop. So making those decisions last year, when you and your partner looked at it and go, these aren't serving us. How did you go about making those decisions to maybe close a business or sell it or move on? Yeah, so
there's three factors in this decision making that I that came across with me, which probably will be the same for most. There's the emotional and the ego side of it. Yeah. There is the people. Yeah. Side of it, and then there's the rational mind side of it. Yeah. And so I guess looking at it rationally, I understood that those businesses needed to go. Yeah. Whether it be financial or from like a bandwidth point of view. Yeah. The reason why I held some of those businesses for longer than I wanted to was because of the people that were in them, who were great people, who ultimately I had a responsibility to ensure that they either the business was closed in an orderly manner where they were looked after, or that they had a home to go to. Yeah. And then the emotional and ego side is that, you, whether or not you are competent and whether you or not, whatever your position is, you still have an element of failure, and could I have done something different? And the reality is, with any business, nearly any business, as long as your model, as long as your business plan makes sense, any business can succeed. 100%. I can tell you, I can go into nearly every business and make it a success. Doesn't matter what the business is, because I have the passion, the drive, the motivation, and I'm willing to roll my sleeves up. But I am one man. And I also have to look after well-being of myself and my family. And you have to be aware that you're not Superman. And so in the disposal of some of the hospitality businesses, the journey went on that I decided rationally that it needed to be closed. And then I found buyers for those businesses, so the people's jobs were secure. And then I disposed of them and got rid of them. And that's it. And so I think with the couple of businesses that I got rid of there, it's also the narrative, because in reality, I could have closed those businesses, liquidated them, and made the staff redundant. That in my mind would have been a failure. Whereas I think giving everyone continuing with their jobs, and the reality is, if I've got a business that some businesses I wasn't visiting very regularly. Or being very involved with, in reality, it's much better for everyone's outcome and well-being if they have someone who owns a business who's super passionate about it, and who's really going to drive it forward. And that was that really. And so I think you've just got to, as a business leader, make decent, rational decisions. And try and do the right thing, it is the truth. Agree.
Well said. So moving forward, what does the future look like? Because I know I'm following you online, I keep seeing you going to America and Turkey and like lots of, you said you went to Chiang Mai. So what's the future looking like for you?
Well, I lost both my parents last year, and that gave me an opportunity to think about how I wanted to live my life. And so, and like we listened to podcasts and things, I was listening to something from the Times yesterday that talked about retirement. And I suspect for a lot of us with better healthcare outcomes, retirement used to be that you would work from 16 to 65 and then you live for another 10 years. How it looks at the moment is you start work at 23, 24, 25 because most people go to university. And they have aspirations to work until they're 50. And then they're probably going to live for another 30 years. And so retirement can't be how it has been for most people. And so that probably what that looks like in the long term is probably people will have to work longer in some form or another. Probably, not that I'm an expert. So I guess what I decided in my decision making and was that I wanted to do more travel. Actually business is a lifestyle for me. I enjoy it. I get up every day and I love doing what I do. But I want to be able to do it. One thing when I ran the technology business in the Middle East was it was nice waking up to the sun and on your face and the heat every day. Although I'm a very positive person, it can be a little bit of a mood killer when it's -2 in the UK and pissing down with rain. So, so my plan and my aspiration is, Nicola, who runs the mortgage business, and my role within that is really driving top end of the funnel and managing the advisors. We are of the opinion that we can double that business. It's a relatively sizable business anyway. We think that we can double that this year. It's our aspiration to help even more customers. To give you an idea of scale and size of that business, we have somewhere between 100 and 120 customers inquire about mortgage advice every day. We do hundreds and hundreds of completing mortgages a month. And the business is, we aspire for it to be a 7 million, a multi-million pound profit business in the next in the forward year. So hospitality, Figurati does very well. It's a very profitable business. We have great customer outcomes there. People seem to be very happily, generally speaking.
I'm one of those.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I guess we want to continue building that. Is there room for, there's a couple of conversations that we've had as business partners, which may be a sort of a more casual dining concept in sort of malls and shopping centres, maybe a concept where we go to other marinas with Figurati, maybe, I'm not sure. It's been a lot of work for the team to get it where it needs to be. So I don't want to overwhelm them with, but I think that will continue. And it's just, I guess, the great thing about being in business, and it's much easier when you have a stable business that produces profit, is it's really just about having your eyes open. And again, going back to that thing of doing what you enjoy. If something comes along and I think, wow, I would really enjoy that, I'd probably do it. What you have to be good at as you start to scale and grow and become a bit more high profile is to be able to say your business idea is really great, but it's not for me. You have to be...
And not yes to everything.
Yeah, well, the joke that went around the city for a little while was if Chris Schutrups eats in your restaurant, he'll buy it. Was what people were saying. And, and so it's just about being able to also say, you know what, I don't need to make money out of everything. A missed opportunity, but keeping focus on your core business, because otherwise you end up diluting yourself, you dilute the outcome across all your teams. And from a well-being point of view, it's, it's a lot of work for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think are the top couple of skills that every business owner leader needs to have?
Marketing being number one. If I could get, if our education system allowed for everyone to be an expert on marketing, because actually as a business owner, it doesn't matter what your business is. It really doesn't. But if you don't have customers, you don't have a business. And so that's the number one tip. The amount of great businesses that I see where the business owner just does not know how to market. And it is a bit of a minefield. You've got some really great marketing companies out there, but you've also got a lot of people who will sell a quick buck, try and sell a dream. And it's a confusing if you don't understand it. So definitely marketing would be number one. Number two, it's about communicating. Being a good communicator, an effective communicator. And I'm not claiming to be a genius at this, by the way. There may be some of my team members who think, bloody hell, he's selling himself short. But, trying to be a good communicator.
But you are doing well at it. So
thank you. And then, leading from the front, honestly, because I travel a lot. But if you speak to my team members, whether I'm in Las Vegas, which I do like 8-10 times a year, whether I'm in Asia, Africa, wherever it may be, I am online, I am working. In Vegas, to give you an example, I will land into Vegas and then I will get up at 4 a.m. Vegas time. I will go to a co-working space for 6 a.m. Vegas time. Which is about 2 p.m. UK time. I will then work through until about 3-4 o'clock Vegas time, and then I'll go and enjoy myself.
Nice.
And so when you lead from the front, I always say to my team members, I will ask you to work hard, but you will never work harder than me. And I think that's a really important thing, because no one resents you traveling or living a good life or, making memories if you're working hard. What they resent is the social media where you're in a Lamborghini with your golden watch, and they're sat there slaving away in the -3 degrees in Eastleigh. Whilst you're there living the dream and the high life off of their back, so it's really about having that leading from the front and working hard. And I definitely am not at a stage in life I would drive myself mental if I didn't work. Oh my goodness, I'd be a terrorist of my own life. So it's definitely a lifestyle for me.
Absolutely love that. And with this being the Fail Forward podcast, what does fail forward mean to you, Chris?
I think failure is inevitable for most people, for sure. I think it's about, making sure that you don't let your ego get in the way, using your head. And, we teach our children right at the beginning that they're going to get stuff wrong and they need to learn from it. My children have made mistakes. They will make mistakes. They will get in trouble. The important thing is that they learn from that and they become better people. That's the same of failure in business. If you get everything right, everything's a dead certainty. You're going to fail. Things are not going to be right. Learn from it and get over it. And the other thing that's really important, is we sit and we think about what people will think. What are they going to think? What are people saying? Oh my God, what you've also got to realise is people don't give a shit about you. Like, the old saying, today's newspaper is tomorrow's fish wrapper, is exactly true. You're the only one that cares. And once you get over it and you realise people don't care.
Yeah.
It's great gossip for a day.
Yeah.
Then they move. As soon as you can get over that point, you're going to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been really great having you on the Fail Forward show.
Thank you for having me.
If people want to go to an amazing restaurant in Southampton, go to Figurati.
Thank you.
And if anyone needs a mortgage, go to the Mortgage Hut.
That's it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for being on. Cheers, Chris. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks all for listening. If people want to get in touch with Chris, I'm going to drop his socials and his contact in the link for this show. So thanks for listening, guys. Thank you for listening to Podcast Today. I'm on a mission to get people to understand that failure is part of the process. So please share this far and wide, like and subscribe.